Welcome back to the Be More podcast, where we inspire you to be a little bit more of every role within the Salesforce ecosystem. For today's session, we are talking Be More content creator. You can create Salesforce related content in a number of different ways, podcasts like this one, blogs, or YouTube videos. Somebody that I've been following online for a while, a fan of their videos, is Emily Call, who's joining us today to talk about what it means to be more content creator. So, Emily, without further ado, if you could introduce yourself for our audience, please.
My name is Emily Call. I've been on the Salesforce ecosystem for about 9 years. I run the Salesforce Emily YouTube channel that has kind of divulged into blogs and creating courses for certification prep.
Thanks for joining us today. That's great. So maybe if you could explain to our audience kind of how you see this role for the purposes of the questions. Your role is content creator in inverted commas. So how would you introduce how that works for you?
Yeah, so content creation for me is a lot about helping other people with the problems I've already solved. One of my first roles on the Salesforce ecosystem, other than being a user, was Salesforce support. And I'd get a lot of questions about how to use Salesforce, or how do I do this one specific thing or this one specific task within Salesforce. And I thought, man, I love YouTube. I wish that there was like a video on how to create this that I could just send off to my users and then explain how to use it. So a lot of it was kind of both trying to help people while also a little bit selfishly trying to create something that would make my job a little bit easier.
We all love a little bit of self-service, so in terms of your role, just to expand on that a little bit more for our audience, primarily the YouTube channel, right? You mentioned some blogs too.
Yeah, so I started off with the YouTube channel, creating videos just on simple how to create records and fields and different automations. And it's moved into now backing all those up on blogs because not everyone can watch a YouTube video in their circumstances. So I wanted to be able to help people wherever they can or wherever they need it.
Yeah, it's good to consider those out there that might have specific accessibility needs or just different learning techniques. Like videos don't necessarily work for everyone, right?
Yeah, definitely. While videos can be super helpful, can't always watch a YouTube video.
Yeah, exactly. So do you tailor your role for a particular like set of professionals in the ecosystem? Like, is it geared towards admins, developers, consultants? How would you explain that?
It kind of goes along with whatever I'm working on at that specific time within my other positions. First, I started off with the more user end of trying to help users, and then it also divulged or kind of moved into admin tasks and how to do the basic admin tasks for maybe accidental admins or newer admins to the ecosystem.
It's good to have a different variety of content out there so you can kind of connect and help different people, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And do you find with that, like if we were taking a role of a Salesforce user and a role of a Salesforce admin, do you find that there's a kind of overlap between those roles and content could maybe be applicable to both of them?
Definitely. There's some areas where it can be, like specifically in record creation. Sometimes users need a lot of help in record creation, but also admins need help to kind of understand maybe what the best practices are for creating things for your users, like page layouts or where certain things would look on a certain page.
Yeah.
That could be really helpful for both of those.
Okay. Awesome. And how much time do you put into your content creation? Like, do you go through a traditional kind of life cycle of planning it out and then kind of saying, oh, this is a really cool new feature that I'm looking at and I want to cover a video on this and I'm going to schedule it in for like 2 or 3 weeks time? How does that work and kind of what time commitment does that require?
Well, it really depends. I'm a huge fan of batch working. So I recently went through and I created about 50 videos, which will get me almost a full year's length of videos, which is another story in itself. But I'll usually get the ideas from my comments now or from people just asking questions about how to use certain features or issues that I've run into while my day-to-day work is going on. And then I'll go through the process of creating a use case for it and then kind of explaining the tools, how to use it, or how to solve the specific problem. And then, of course, the editing, scheduling of it all.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And I guess that partially extends to creating your test records, objects, fields as well, right?
Definitely.
Okay. So if there's anybody watching this, and as you probably know, that there's lots of different people in the ecosystem that like to give back. There's people that write blogs, there's people that run YouTube channels like you, there's people that do podcasts like this one. If there was somebody that was looking to kind of get into this arena of content creation, what tips, advice would you give to those people?
There is a million and one things that you can learn about content creation. You can learn about all the different equipment that you need, all of the different settings, all of the different marketing tools that you could use to be able to reach different people. But I think that the number one thing is just learn the basics of what you have and what you can use, and then just get started and do it. And then you can improve later on upon your different things. I've been doing YouTube for over 4 years now, and my first setups were absolutely terrible, but we've upgraded since then, and it's been really, really awesome to have people say, hey, you can try this to make this better, such as your sound and using different microphones or using different recording softwares. That, and also sharing it out, and don't be afraid to put it out there, and then also share it with the people where they're at.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. I think that's great. And I can definitely resonate with some of those points. Like, I kind of look back at some of my earlier content, I kind of cringe at how I was recording them, like my presentation skills, my setup. Like, I've only recently got a microphone. I've kind of leveled up over time. And I guess I'm kind of learning what does and doesn't work. Do you think you have kind of your own fair share of that as well?
Definitely. I think I've gone through probably 4 or 5 different microphones and cameras.
Yeah.
I think just gradually over time, understanding what works and what doesn't work for content creation, having better ideas as well as part of it.
Yeah, exactly. From my own experience, when you start doing this, like in particular on YouTube, I get a fair amount of people contact me that want to improve my SEO, and terms like that are a little bit scary initially, right? And
Yeah,
concepts are like, for some people, if they're not in a marketing type background, they're probably like brand new concepts, right? What is essential, I guess, in terms of terminology and concepts, and what could perhaps wait?
yeah. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made earlier on in my YouTube was clickbaity titles
Mm.
in content that was not clickbaity at all. I think just kind of being more specific about what you're actually doing, what you're saying, and then you can get more into, I wouldn't say clickbaity, but more interesting titles as you go on.
Yeah, again, kind of resonate there. I look back at some of my early videos, not necessarily clickbaity, but I was looking at some of the titles and I was like, how did I think that somebody was actually going to understand what I'm doing in this video by the title, right?
Yeah,
Really important to have like a clear, concise, almost like plain English example of, this is how to count the number of contacts in the flow, or whatever it is, you know. Some of my
definitely.
titles were like paragraphs of their own, really.
Yeah.
Have you ever fallen
Yeah.
into that trap?
Um, a little bit. I remember earlier on, I would do that and I would be thinking like, man, I know a lot of people are searching for this, but why aren't they, clicking on this video? But a lot of it was just trial and error of trying to figure out what works in the space and what doesn't, because Salesforce is very specific and very search heavy.
Yeah, and in terms of promotion of your content, like, how did you start out with that? Like, did you promote it on your own social media? Because your YouTube channel's got a massive following now.
I really kick myself because of this. I didn't really share it out until probably the last year or so. So I've been doing YouTube for over 4 years. I felt really afraid to post it on LinkedIn. Specifically is a really a big deal for Salesforce because it's more of a professional tool. I'm a really shy person, like in real life, and I have a hard time kind of crossing over my professional and my personal life. And I thought, well, LinkedIn is like feels super personal because I have people that like I work with on here, and I don't want them to know that like I'm doing this cool thing or this weird thing on the side, depending on who looks at it. I think a lot of people think it's a little weird, but other people think it's really cool. I think I just got in my head about it. I'm not super consistent on LinkedIn, but I think that is one of the better ways to reach an audience when you're creating content.
Yeah, definitely. There's loads of Salesforce professionals on LinkedIn, and whenever I put content out, definitely reaches the masses by promoting it on LinkedIn. So we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but if you were to start out in this role again as a content creator, what would you do differently?
I mean, there's a lot of things because hindsight is always 2020, and you always look back and you're like, oh, I could have done this really awesome thing that has grown my channel a lot more. This has grown my blog a lot more. I think I would have started on LinkedIn earlier, which is one thing that I just mentioned. I also think I would have started my other adjacent things like a blog and an email list earlier, as well as maybe being more consistent with my content.
I think that's great advice. I feel like now I'm comfortable with doing this podcast, and this is my content now. So I think it can help to inspire people and maybe appreciate like the various different paths you have in the ecosystem, because you have the traditional admin routes, right? Which probably the majority of people know about, but then you have other routes like designer and BA that kind of aren't as well established or well known, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think having a strong why of how you're creating this content and what you're creating it for, that's super important.
Yeah, kind of the goals, objectives, like what are you trying to do, who are you trying to inspire, where are you trying to help, I think is a great kind of thing to think about. So kind of jumping a little bit back to the LinkedIn thing, there's some kind of, I'm not sure, but like internal saboteur or something in my mind about mixing LinkedIn with Salesforce related things that I do in my own time. It's weird, and I don't know how else to describe it, but for me, by the time I started doing content, I was already quite well established on LinkedIn and had lots of connections and followers. But now I kind of definitely have a line between Salesforce related social media, I call it, and my own personal social media.
Yeah,
Do you
definitely.
do you think it's important to have that boundary?
I think so. I try and keep it mostly like if it's personal, then I very much have it in my personal bracket and I very much establish it as a this is my personal thing. Whereas my more professional stuff, you can definitely tell it's either LinkedIn or Twitter or YouTube. But it's really nice that Salesforce and Salesforce content is so professional leaning that it's easy to make that differentiation between personal and professional things.
Yeah, I think it's good to just kind of be open and honest with people about what you're doing in your professional life, kind of in your, I'm going to say, Salesforce extracurricular life,
Yeah.
and also like in your personal life as well, because the lines do blur, the boundaries do change, and I think it's important to just be open with people. And I think kind of comes a little bit back to goals as well. Like as long as I'm helping people, inspiring people, I'm happy, right? And I guess similar for you.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think like it's almost every time I post on LinkedIn. I don't know what it is about LinkedIn. Maybe it's just that I've got that crossover, but it's like, okay, if I post about this video or this blog post, it's going to reach a lot more people and it's going to help a lot more people. And then my internal feelings about it are just going to be really insignificant in comparison to how many people I'm going to be able to help.
That's what would motivate me to post it. So what if somebody from college sees it and thinks, oh, they're doing all these YouTube now or whatever. I think that's great, solid advice there. So if you were to kind of summarize what skills or attributes it takes to run something like a YouTube channel, what kind of qualities come to mind?
I think that the ability to like adapt as well as learn more. I like to just try and get 1% better with each video. And so that includes a lot of learning more about how to explain things better and how to get my thoughts across clearer, as well as learning how to use better examples or using better equipment. I think that's really important to have adaptability as well as wanting to learn more and get better.
Yeah. I think something that I learned fairly like early on, like I produced some content and I got some comments that weren't necessarily critical, but I kind of took them as critical. And I was like, well, how can I do this anymore? You know, if I'm getting comments about how I could have demonstrated something a little bit better or explained something that I didn't show, like in a tutorial. And I kind of battled with that a little bit. And I don't know if you've ever had that. Maybe it's just me and my like inner perfectionist, but I think what I've learned is nothing can like ever be 100% perfect and accurate, and things in Salesforce change, right? Then
Yeah, 3 times a year, things are changing. It's snappy. But yeah, I definitely feel that sentiment of like people having comments, and I get the emails that have the comments, and like I
yeah,
see almost every one of them, and then I have to like take a step back if they're very critical or if they're not super nice, and kind of be like, okay, what's the sentiment behind this comment? Are they trying to be malicious, or can I really gather something behind this to take with me and kind of improve my content even more? I just try and step back from it before I come back to it and then try and improve on it and not take it so personally. I think that's something that I've really learned a lot, is to have a thicker skin from creating content.
yeah, I think that's kind of what it boils down for me as well. It just ultimately, you can't always please everybody. You can try to help everybody.
Yeah.
Also, the way that you try to help won't work for everybody as well.
Yeah, and that's what I think can be really great about creating content, is that how you explain something isn't going to be how someone else can explain something. There's room for a lot of different people to create content. Some people might really understand my Harry Potter references, but other people aren't going to understand. So you really have to kind of find the content creator that works for you if you're consuming content and what jives with you.
Yeah, exactly, because different things work for different people. So
Yeah,
I think that's really important, because I guess the more you connect with it, the more you absorb and learn, and the more it helps you as a result, right?
definitely.
Okay. So moving on a little bit, but if there was an opportunity to demyth something about producing content, so in your case, YouTube videos and the blogs, or perhaps a misconception of somebody that does this, is there anything you'd like to share for our audience?
Um, it is not as hard as people think it is. I think a lot of people think that creating content is this huge involved process, and it can be if you really want it to. But I don't think I learned how to edit until I was 2 years into creating content. All my content was like one shoot. And so you hear a lot of ums and buts in my content. I work on Mac. And so a lot of what I do is through QuickTime, which is just like this really simple software that's already downloaded on your Mac that's free to use. And so you can just hit record and start going. There are so many free tools out there that you don't need to have it be super expensive or have it be super complicated or super involved unless you want it to. Which again, like going back to what we talked about earlier, that can come with time. And for me, it definitely has come with time, that I've made things a little bit more complicated and a little bit better in editing and editing softwares that I use and how I record things.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's great advice, because there was one day in particular, I just decided, right, that's it, I'm going to do it. And I did. I
Yeah.
just went, and I think I spoke about APIs or something for my first content. You know, it kind of all blurs into one after a while, especially if you kind of do a chain of videos like what you described,
Yeah.
especially that many. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. You know, I'm going to use the tools that I'm familiar with, and I'm on a Mac as well. And I had learned at school how to use iMovie. So I just went straight to iMovie, recorded the thing, and edited it in iMovie, because that's what I was used to, right? And
Yeah.
now I've kind of graduated a little bit more into perhaps more advanced tools are now using kind of Descript instead. I'm still kind of getting used to it.
Definitely. And I think a lot of that goes back to, like, you're talking about something that you typically have experience on. For you, that's talking about APIs and other tools like that. And for maybe someone like Andy, who you've had on your podcast before, he talks a lot about flows. And so he can do that. I think that really helps to get over the hurdle, as well as, like, you're talking about something that you know and that you really like. Or for me, it's talking about something that I've had issues with or struggles with and how I've solved it. And so I think that helps in overcoming a lot of the recording hurdles as well.
Yeah, and I think ultimately kind of don't beat yourself up around those kind of fluff ups as well, because they will happen, right? We're human beings. At the end of the day, you can just edit them out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. There's a lot of editing that happens for sure for me. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Getting rid of all those and ands.
yeah.
Uh, so we're kind of bringing today's session to a close a little bit, but before we do go, where can people connect with you? So you've mentioned the YouTube channel and the blog already. How can people search for those and find those?
Search for Salesforce Emily. That'll be both the YouTube channel and the blog. And then you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter at Emily Call MBA.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again for your time today, and hopefully together we'll inspire some more people to create some more amazing content.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Be More with Tom Bassett. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave any feedback in the comments.